Okay, it's 9:15 by the clock on the wall. It is, we're in the county boardroom at St. Croix County. My name is Joe Miller. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Board of Adjustment, and I'm going to call this meeting to order. First thing we'll do is roll call, so those of you want to identify yourselves.
Dave Peterson, citizen member, Town of Kinnickinnick.
Greg Telejohn, District Supervisor 14, representing Aaron Prairie, Warren, and a little bit of Warren and Richmond Townships.
Dave Nickham, Town of Baldwin, citizen member.
Heather Amos, Corporation Counsel on behalf of the county.
Ellen Denzer, Community Development Director.
Okay, and is there any reason to believe, or does anyone in the audience feel this meeting has not been properly noticed? Please speak now. And hearing none, then we'll assume that it has been noticed appropriately. One of the agenda items is approval of the minutes from last month. So pending any discussion from the board members, we will deem those meetings as approved. And seeing no objection, we will deem them approved. In case you haven't heard, if you plan on speaking this morning, please sign in on the sheet on the credenza there if you hadn't done so already. I don't see anybody jumping up to do that, so I'm going to assume everybody has done that. The sequence that we plan on using today will be the community development staff will give their report and we'll do questions and answers. The applicant will have an opportunity to get up and state their position on the application with questions and answers. We'll hear from those folks that are in favor of the application, those opposed, and then we'll take general comments from the audience. At that point, we'll close the hearing, not take any further evidence, and the board members will discuss the application amongst themselves, and then we will take a vote on it. Before we get started on the ward application, we received a really late application from the DNR, and it's my understanding with the discussion with the Corporation Counsel and the ward attorney that they would like to do a postponement of this hearing. Am I correct in assuming that?
Yes, you are. I have spoken to the attorney for the wards, and with the late submission from the DNR that we received yesterday and some other questions that have come up, there is a request from myself also, so I can do additional legal research to postpone. It would be number 4, the wards variance request, to the July meeting. And so if the board is so inclined, I'd ask that a motion to postpone be made and addressed by the board.
Board members, any discussion?
No, I'd move that we postpone the ward exception, was it, until the July meeting.
I'll second that.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. It's carried unanimously. Thank you. And with that, we are ready for our first application.
Good morning, board members. Our land use administrator, Mike Wozniak, is on vacation, so I will be presenting today. And I'll get us down to the first item. Ways to go. This is an application from Matthew Construction. Milestone Materials is the agent for a renewal of their conditional use permit for a non-metallic miner operation in the town of Emerald, pursuant to section 15.370 of the St. Croix County zoning ordinance and the requirements of the non-metallic mining ordinance and mining adjacent to the existing site. We have reviewed this site. Our staff person who was out at site, Kevin Graybow, is with us today if you have any additional questions after reviewing the staff report. But the mine is in compliance with all the conditions of the 2018 conditional use permit renewal. There have been no complaints on the record for this mine since the last renewal. The site is internally drained, and the current permitted hours of operation are 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday through Friday. There are no changes proposed to the hours of operation. There is no mining into groundwater, none is proposed. Dust control measures are utilized as needed, erosion control measures the same. Milestone Materials submitted a new financial assurance bond as required in 2003. The former bond was $60,000, the new amount is $109,184. Milestone is not proposing any changes or additions to the existing approved operations or reclamation plans. And I would say that Kevin informed me of his site inspection that there hasn't been a lot of activity there. It's basically utilized when there is, by Milestone, when there is something going on in the vicinity that makes it prudent to utilize this mine. So, and with that, this is where the site is. As you can see, there's an entrance road and then the mine here. This is actually a bit of an older picture. A great deal of this area has already been reclaimed back in here. The reclamation is, of course, an ongoing process. It will continue on the side slopes as excavation progresses, and the stockpile room is no longer needed, and the floor will then be reclaimed. Post-mining land use is pasture land and passive recreation. The backfilled face and floor areas will be graded to a 3-to-1 slope, and there will be no high walls left after the completion of the reclamation. No man-made features or related facilities will be left on the site after cessation of mining. There have been no comments from the DNR or the Town of Emerald. You have the choice to move forward, approve the request, deny the request, table or postpone the decision for additional information. We recommend that you approve the conditional use permit renewal with the condition that all previous conditions shall remain in effect. Are there any questions?
Is that new bond amount of $109,000, do you concur with that, or have you seen the math on how they arrived at that number?
I'm sure it's based on changes in the last 5 years to state requirements and county requirements. Yeah, the number is correct.
Okay.
You mentioned there were no complaints from the last time this was renewed. Has there ever been complaints there that you know of?
None that we're aware of, no.
This is excuse me, this conditional use permit, is there a time limit on that, or why is it up for renewal?
Every 5 years.
Every 5 years.
Per our ordinance,
Okay.
these come back before you.
Okay.
And when they're just renewal, we don't open it up and usually keep it very, very concise, very simple.
Okay. I guess that's all we need. Ms. Anderson, would you like to come up and make a comment?
Can you hear me? Okay, thank you. I'm Candy Anderson with Milestone Materials, and Ellen did a great job with the summary of the staff report. I put the permit application together, and so I don't have anything really to add from Ellen's report, but I would gladly take questions.
Does the county haul out of this pit?
The biggest customer here is the town of Emerald.
Okay.
Yeah, and then if we were to get a construction project somewhere, we would go in and work out of there, but when we're not doing that, the town comes out of there.
Okay. Does anyone in the audience? Anyone want to speak against it? Dave, do you have a question?
So you bring the crusher in and crush a pile, and then that's what the crusher isn't there very seldom, right?
That's correct. The crusher will come in when material is needed. So it's an as-needed basis only. So the last time I believe we crushed in there was 2016. That was a pile for the town, and they're still working off of that.
Okay.
And so we'll bring another one in if a project comes up or when that pile is becoming depleted.
Okay, I guess that wraps up the questions from the board. Thank you.
Thank you.
At this point, we'll close the hearing then and not take any more evidence. This is a fairly...
You need to give somebody a chance to speak against it if they want. We didn't do that, did we? You said to speak for.
Yeah, I did.
Did you say against? Is there anybody to speak against?
Yeah, is there anyone that wanted to speak against this application? Anybody who have general comments? All righty, we'll close the hearing at this point. And this is a fairly simple renewal. We've seen this one several times, so it rarely has any issues. Board members, any discussion amongst ourselves? I will entertain a motion to do something with this permit.
I move we approve.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Denzer. We're ready for the next one, I guess.
Thank you. Our next application is from Matt and Kelsey Henderson, 510 232nd Street, Somerset, or Avenue, excuse me, in Somerset. They're applying for a conditional use permit to operate a contractor storage yard and a contractor shop for a landscaping business per section 15.330 of the St. Croix County zoning ordinance on Lot 4 of Certified Survey Map, Volume 12, page 3475. In the town of Somerset, 3.92 acres. So it is currently zoned R2 residential. It has an existing dwelling and a small accessory structure located behind the dwelling along the west property line over here. There's a new 40 by 60 accessory building and a driveway extension that were construction in 2022, last year. You can see there, the building is in yellow, driveway's in blue. The lot was established in 1998. Again, it's 3.92 acres. Lot 4, the access is off from 232nd Avenue. There is an existing dwelling and sanitary system constructed back in 1999. The accessory structure was permitted for residential use by the town of Somerset. Jumps a little bit, sorry about that. I need to remember to use this. So. The site plan submitted by the applicant notes the 40 by 60, 2,400 square foot building that was constructed. And I'm going to move this down. There we go. And that surrounding that building on to the east is some storage and also some additional storage areas for outdoor storage of vehicles, equipment, and materials. And there in the blue rectangles. There's maple trees that have been planted along the driveway on the east lot line, and they're also noted on this site plan. Oops. The landscaping company is operating as Croix LLC, and the activities would be landscape design, build, maintenance, snow removal, and they would store vehicles, equipment, and landscape materials on site. Hours of operation, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. The owner's crew meets at the site to get equipment and ready and then leaves to work on jobs off-site and drops off work equipment at the end of the workday. Identifies 2 to 3 summer employees who will work and park there during the day. Equipment that is expected to be stored on the site include 2 trailers, 2 to 3 trucks, and 1 skid steer. Also, storage of outdoor landscape materials such as edging, rock, soil, or sand may be stored near the buildings as identified on the site plan. Zoning compliance issues. This site has been in compliance discussion. Staff have been addressing complaints regarding the business on the property for the last year. The initially staff determined that a conditional use permit was required, and Mr. Henderson submitted an application in September. Upon review and based on the level of vehicle equipment and storage described by the owner, that decision was reversed, and the permit was returned. The permit application was returned. However, ongoing complaints required additional staff investigation of the property. Neighborhood concerns centered around aesthetic impacts related to outdoor parking, storage, lighting, and general compatibility with an R2 residential district. Mr. Henderson was informed by letter dated January 26, 2023, that the storage of multiple vehicles, trailers, equipment, and landscape-related materials falls under contractor storage yard use category and is subject to obtaining a conditional use permit. After receiving the letter, Mr. Henderson did not initially choose to submit the CUP application. Our Corporation Counsel, Heather Amos, sent a letter to Mr. Henderson and dated it April 10th, 2023, confirming the CUP requirement and ordering him to cease and desist his business operations until a permit was issued. He then submitted a permit application on May 1st, and he has responded to questions from our staff, and we have an attached email dated June 8th, 2023. Here's some views of the site from 232nd Street. This is the accessory building in question, kind of a far back and a further up one. Also shows a little bit of the outdoor storage along the back side here and over in this area. There's another view of the site. This looks towards the outdoor storage from a neighbor's dwelling. Again, now you can see the vehicles parked a little more clearly. You can see some other equipment and materials here in this area and possibly over here. It's a little harder to see through the trees, but it's definitely visible. This site picture provides us with miscellaneous equipment, a little closer up view, and the materials stored, again, in leaf-off condition in this general vicinity. This is the view towards the area in leaf-on conditions from the neighbor's dwelling, probably the same one as we were provided with the leaf-off. You can still see a little bit of the equipment, but not much. Here's some site views from on-site, probably employee parking. There is a porta potty right next to the property, the tree line. And you can see right here the maple trees. They're pretty small right at this time. This was referred to the town of Somerset for review. The town did require Mr. Henderson to submit an application, and they are going to look at that at their June 21st Town Plan Commission meeting, and again at their July 12th County Town Board meeting. There was an email to that effect attached to your packet from the town clerk regarding that they had to move it back due to the holiday, and they're not sure if it could be postponed, but they wanted the Board of Adjustment to know that the town will not have this on their town meeting until July 12th. They did meet last night, their Plan Commission did, and they did send us their minutes from their Plan Commission, which Julie is handing out to you right now, and they'd asked that their comments be read into the record, which I will do at this time. It's about halfway down the page. It starts conditional use permit, Matt and Kelsey Henderson, 510 232nd Avenue, contractor storage yard for Croix Outdoors, LLC, residential and commercial landscaping and snow removal services. Discussion on the shed that was constructed and if it is used as commercial. Henderson stated the shed is not used for commercial. Schachner asked if the equipment is stored inside, and Henderson said, no, it is stored outside. Henderson stated the shed is for boats, snowmobiles, and four-wheelers. Germain asked how many employees, and Henderson answered, right now, 1, but not more than 5. Germain stated outdoor storage of salt may be an issue and discussed dropping a Connex box for salt storage. Neighbors were present as a group and requested some evergreens/screening planted and move the porta potty if possible. They don't begrudge the business, but the view of the porta potty and equipment is what they are concerned with. Permanent evergreen screening requested. Henderson stated he could move the portable toilet and could put a fence or trees. Building inspector stated that shed was built to residential standards, and if he has employees and stores equipment in the shed, It is not built to commercial permit requirements. The shed would have to be re-permitted if used for commercial. Motion by Jermaine, seconded by Yankee, to recommend approval of the conditional use permit for Matt and Kelsey Henderson for a contractor storage yard at 510 232nd Avenue with evergreen screening, adequate height around the shed and the porta potty, no commercial use of the shed, and concern with hours of operation for the neighbors, and no lighting toward the neighbors. Motion carried. Again, this is from the Plan Commission, and it will still have to be voted on by the town board. There were 2 town board members who are members of the Plan Commission who were present, according to these minutes. All right. So, Section 15.330.5 of the county's zoning ordinance reads as follows. Screening. The applicant shall provide vegetative screening from any abutting lot in the R1, R2, or R3 zoning districts. The applicant has planted 14 maple trees along the east boundary, which serves the accessory building and is the east boundary property line, or I should say along the driveway. The lot impacted to the greatest degree from the contractor storage yard activity is the lot immediately to the east, 516 232nd Avenue, owned by John and Melissa Wilson. Vegetation located on the Wilsons' property serves to screen the activity during leaf-on conditions. Dependence on vegetation located on a neighboring property does not satisfy the screening requirements for outdoor parking and storage areas. Neither the maple trees that have been planted nor the existing vegetation will effectively screen the outdoor storage area during leaf-off. Effective screening will require planting of evergreen trees between the proposed outdoor storage area and the applicant's east property line. In addition, the porta potty that is utilized by employees should be screened by fencing and/or landscaping. Lighting complaints include the brightness of lighting from under-eave lights and a spotlight on the front of the accessory building. Neighboring property owner has indicated that use of lighting has been more subdued in recent months. Section 15.330 requires all lighting associated with the contractor storage yard to be illuminated downward and shielded away from the abutting properties and any public road. And you can see from these pictures that there is quite a bit of lighting on the storage shed, and there is a fairly bright light in the yard. Action for the Board of Adjustment today is to grant the conditional use subject to the provisions in Section 15.56A, B, C, D, and E. Has to comply with all applicable standards in the district, development standards, and applicable use regulations. The proposed use cannot cause reduction of the property values in the affected neighborhood. For purposes of this section, affected neighborhood includes any areas within the contiguous residential subdivision or planned development and any other area where a person demonstrates that their property would be adversely affected. The proposed use would not constitute a nuisance by reason of noise, dust, smoke, odor, lighting, water or air contaminants, traffic, stormwater runoff quantity or quality, pests, or similar factors. The use does not violate the spirit or intent of this chapter and is not contrary to public health, safety, or general welfare. You can approve the request, deny the request, table or postpone the decision to consider information gathered or request additional information. Again, proposed findings of fact for consideration of the board. The property owners are Matt and Kelsey Henderson, 510 232nd Street, Somerset. The site is at 510 232nd Street, Lot 4, in the town of Somerset. The Henderson property is 3.92 acres in area and is located within the R2 residential zoning district. Contractor storage yards are only permitted within the R2 residential zoning district with an approved conditional use permit. The applicant filed an application with the St. Croix County Board of Adjustment for a conditional use permit to conduct a contractor storage yard within the R2 district according to 15.330 of the St. Croix County zoning ordinance. The existing septic system was installed in 1999 and is, as of 7/20/2020, was found to be compliant. The following conditions are required to be met. If it does not require, if it did not require a conditional use permit, it would have to obtain a land use permit. The conditional use permit or land use permit shall be obtained before any new structures are constructed or equipment is stored on the lot. The applicant shall not store, erect, or employ any structures, services, or operations, vehicles, employees not indicated in the approved plans. The applicant shall secure all necessary permits and approvals from the town or any other local, state, or federal permits and approvals required. Again, operational standards, the applicant shall maintain the property in a neat and orderly manner. Activities are limited to the storage of equipment and vehicles for use off-site. No manufacturing, retail services, or other business services shall take place on the same lot. In the R1 or R2 districts, hours of operation shall not occur earlier than 6 a.m. or later than 7 p.m. Lighting. To minimize glare, all lighting associated with the contractor storage yard shall be illuminated downward and shielded away from the abutting properties and any public road. Screening. The applicant shall provide vegetative screening within any abutting lot in the R1, R2, or R3 zoning districts. The property is adjacent to RT residentially zoned property and therefore is subject to the conditions listed in 3C, hours of operation and screening. The applicant has planted 11 maple trees along the east side, and it did say 14 in the earlier statement, so we'd have to correct that, along the east side of the driveway serving the accessory building and partially along the east lot line to partially screen outdoor parking and storage areas. Lighting associated with the contractor storage yard, including under-eave lighting and a spotlight, is subject to conditions in lighting, in number 4, lighting in finding 7 above. All right, so the conditions upon which a conditional use permit can be granted. It must comply with all applicable standards and regulations. If approved, the application will be subject to all standards listed in 15.330 and all other applicable regulations. It must not cause a reduction of property values. This use is in place in other areas of the county in similar situations and is not shown to decrease property values. Would not constitute a nuisance. Impacts on surrounding properties may be acceptably managed through enhanced screening of outdoor parking and storage areas and the portable toilet, and if the contractor use is constructed and operated in accordance with submitted plans and adheres to all conditions established by the Board of Adjustment. The use may not violate the spirit or intent of the ordinance. This request does not violate the spirit or intent of this chapter. It is allowed by conditional use. The proposal meets the requirements set forth in 15.330 if constructed and operated according to submitted plans, supporting information, and adherence to conditions established by the Board of Adjustment. The use is not contrary to public health, safety, or welfare. Similar landscaping contracting businesses have been approved under these provisions. If it is conducted again according to approved plans and conditions established by the BOA, the use should not be contrary to public health, safety, and welfare. Our staff recommendation is based on all these findings that we recommend approval of the conditional use permit with the following conditions for the board's consideration. The applicant shall be responsible for securing any necessary town, state, or federal permits, licenses, and approvals. The applicant shall be subject to and meet all rules and regulations in Chapter 15, Section 15.330, Contractor Storage Yards. The property shall be modified consistent with the proposed site plan. Screening of outdoor parking and storage areas shall be enhanced by a continuous evergreen hedge or a row of evergreen trees to be planted between the parking and the storage areas identified on the site plan and the applicant's east property boundary. Spacing, species, and size at the time of planting and method of planting shall be subject to approval by the zoning administrator. The landscape screening shall be installed no later than October 15th, 2023. The portable toilet shall be screened by the use of fencing and/or landscaping in a manner subject to approval by the zoning administrator to substantially limit visibility from abutting properties and public roads. Lighting associated with the contractor storage yard, including the under-eave lighting and spotlight, must be modified and managed by directing light downward, limiting hours of illumination, and relying on motion sensors, or timers to limit impacts on surrounding properties. The zoning administrator or designee shall conduct a final inspection of the property no later than November 1, 2023, where all proposed modification improvements shall be completed. In the event that any associated building permits are revoked or expired, then this permit shall become invalidated. No use is hereby authorized unless conducted in a lawful, orderly, and peaceful manner. This is a more standardized condition that we put in all of our conditional use permits. Nothing herein shall be deemed to authorize any public or private nuisance or constitute a waiver, exemption, or exception to any law, ordinance, order, or rule by the town of Somerset, the county, or the state, or the United States. Should any paragraphs herein be determined by a court competent jurisdiction to be unlawfully illegal or unconstitutional, then that shall be a determination to the particular phrase or paragraph and shall not void the remainder of this conditional use permit. All uses permitted in the R2 residential zoning district shall continue to be permitted on said premises. In addition thereto, the uses described in this conditional use permit are allowed. Upon discontinuance of the use of a contractor storage yard on the premises for a period exceeding 365 days, the issuance of this conditional use permit shall automatically become invalidated. If there was a question on it, the property owner shall have the burden of proof. Any change or addition to use of the property, buildings, or modification or addition to the property, buildings, or facilities shall require review by the zoning administrator. Any new owners must adhere to the standards and conditions of the permit, and this decision applies to the property rather than the individual, is valid only for this specified property and is not transferable. Accepting the decision means that the applicant and their agent have read, understand, and agree to all conditions of this decision and have no objections. Any questions?
We're talking about a contractor storage yard, and yet I noticed in the Somerset minutes said it's not commercial, so I guess I'm having trouble getting my head around that. Could you maybe explain that to me a little bit?
I believe that the statement is the shed is not commercial. The contractor storage yard is the outside yard, and that would be used for the commercial purposes of the owner's business. So the shed, the statement in the minutes from the town of Somerset state that the shed is going to be used for boats, snowmobiles, and four-wheelers. I believe that indicates, doesn't say it, but it indicates those are of a personal nature. I'm sure the applicant can confirm that.
Thank you.
Does that explain what answer your question?
That's right.
Is that a safety issue?
Is what a safety issue?
The fact that the shed isn't built to a commercial standard
Yes.
for his employees, I suppose.
Yeah, I don't know building standards, but they are state of Wisconsin commercial use building standards that would have to have been met if the building were utilized for it.
On item 7, the lighting associated with the yard,
Yes.
when I did my site visit, all the under eave lighting is a flush mount lighting, and the only way it can point is down. So what is there, on the side of the building, I agree, there is a light fixture that does point out into the general area, if you will. Are you interested in having him do something with that flush mounted under eave lighting?
I believe the intent here is limiting hours of illumination, or perhaps instead, it says and/or relying on motion sensors. So basically putting that illumination on timers, motion sensors, or literally having it turn off after a certain period of time, so that it's not on all night long.
Okay, and then the one light in the center of the wall on each one of the 4 sides, you want that to be changed to a downward-facing lighting fixture?
If you're saying that, I think that that would be, again, if you go back to what number 7, says.
Well, in the one photo you showed, there was a real bright light in the center of the wall.
Yeah, that would have to become downward facing.
Okay,
And
yeah.
perhaps that might even need to be limiting hours of illumination or relying on motion sensors or timers if it's a security light.
Okay, because that one definitely is not a downward-facing light fixture. Okay.
I think this covers interpreting it for all of them based on what can be done with a couple of options identified here. And they would be flushed out by the zoning administrator as it talks about here, that he would have to approve the landscaping, the zoning administrator would, and have to go out and look at the screening of landscaping or fencing for the portable toilet. We could add to this that the lighting changes have to be approved by the zoning administrator.
I assume it's LED lighting, and also LED lighting under some circumstances can be reduced lower intensities at night too, so that's a thought.
Yep.
With reference to the porta potty, what's your thoughts on being able to move that into the building where it's completely out of sight?
I think you would have to ask the applicant if that would be acceptable to him, to have his employees going in and out of the building that contains his personal items. And I think that we would have to find out if there is an issue with building code with having a porta potty inside. I'm not sure if there is or not, but there might be a question about odors, pumping it, access for the pumping person. I'd have to look into that.
Just a thought.
Yeah, no,
The complaints, they're about lighting and visibility. There's no complaints about noise or dust or any of that.
not that we've been made aware of. The letter doesn't, from the town, with the neighbors there, does not identify that. Mike's has been in contact with several of the property owners. That's where he got to know some of the pictures. And as identified here, he did have a summary, I'm trying to find that statement, of the complaints from the neighbors. I did read off. Yeah, he lists in here, lighting complaints include brightness of lighting. Neighboring property owner has indicated that use of lighting has been more subdued in recent months. Also has the greatest impact on the neighbor immediately to the east. The vegetation does not satisfy the screening requirement. In addition, the portable toilet that is utilized by employees should be screened for fencing and/or landscaping. I'm assuming all of this comes out of Mike's conversations with neighbors, phone calls, and/or conversations with the town.
This isn't a quick fix, is it? I mean, you can control the lighting or dim it or cover it, make it direct downward or something like that, but as far as the hiding the machinery with trees, it's going to take a while.
Yes, it is, but Mike did identify that it could also be some shrubs, some tall-growing shrubs, which do grow faster. And there are shrubs that, lilacs, lots of different kinds of things that do grow to 14, 15 feet. So he allowed for that. He did identify that they need to be evergreen. Lilacs wouldn't count for that, but you need to be evergreen to screen year-round. Yes, it would take time.
I guess the ultimate goal here in my mind is that the fact that, there are some issues there, and the resolve would be, not necessarily a quick fix, Dave, but I think that, the development department should have the ability to, for lack of a better word, referee. You have neighbors with concerns, and you have a person with a business that they want to conduct. I think it has to be a mutual agreement. We're going to have to learn to work together in this society if we're going to get anywhere. My thoughts.
And I was going to point out, too, that the one other item that was stated in the motion from the town, concern with hours of operation for neighbors and no lighting toward the neighbors. So concern with hours of operation, Mike has not suggested any change in the hours of operation as identified without more specific comments from the public. The hours that are in the county standards, I believe it said 7 p.m. Yep, 6 a.m. or later, or later than 7 p.m. Shall not occur earlier than 6 a.m. or later than 7. So basically 6 to 7 p.m., 6 a.m. So if there is a concern about those hours, and we don't know without a permit if we'd have to ask the applicant if he has been following those hours or different hours. But that would be a good question to see if there's any testimony today specific to that, or if the applicant can answer that question. All we have from the town is concern with hours of operation for the neighbors, and we have nothing specific in the file.
Okay, no more questions from the board? Okay. Mr. Henderson, would you like to come up and provide some additional information?
Which slide would you like up? Okay.
State your name and,
Matt Henderson. And did you have some questions, or?
well, board members?
If you want, I can address the lighting right off the bat. Like you said, you saw Mr. Miller, is it? On your visit, the can lights, they point down. I do have those floodlights on 3 of the 4 sides of the building. They're on a switch. They're only used if I need to see something. They don't stay on ever if I'm not there. So typically they're never on, and neither are the can lights. We do entertaining down there, so if we're going to have some people there, then we would probably have some lighting on. But, so I don't know if that addresses any questions you had, but.
So the lighting would be more in conjunction with personal use rather than contractor storage yard?
Well, yeah, they don't, it's not on, it's not for security or anything, so I would have that on, in the wintertime, when does it get dark? 4:35. If I'm out there at 5:30, I'm gonna need a light, so I turn the light on. But every one of them lights is on a switch, although the outdoor, or the floodlights can be dusk to dawn, they have timers on them, but they're turned off anyways, so yeah, I guess if and when they're on, when I'm using my building and or the property surrounding the building, that might be a nuisance while I'm out there, but that would be me using my property, so I don't know I don't know how to.
Have your neighbors talked to you about their concern?
Prior to the building going in, we had a conversation. I haven't had a conversation with them until last night at the board meeting, which I don't consider a conversation, so we kind of were speaking to the board.
So they haven't confronted you with their issue with you?
I haven't heard from them.
Are all these problems fixable?
I don't know what the problems are. I mean,
With
screening,
lighting, for instance, what we've been talking about with
well,
lighting?
the lighting,
And with visibility of the machinery and?
yeah, so, like it's stated in here a few times, like right now where the leaves are on, you can't really see anything. In the wintertime, the leaves drop, and obviously you can see more. We don't landscape in the winter, so it pretty much sits idle. But I never had any problems with planting trees. It's kind of the business I'm in. So I don't have any issue with that. I just don't understand how all of a sudden that falls onto me financially when just because my neighbors can see my property, So I'm not against planting trees, but also I've never been approached about it until yesterday at the board meeting.
Well, I think sometimes the concern with neighbors is how it affects their property or the value of it or
Yeah.
things like that.
And I realize your job's not to be sorting out neighborly disputes, but the house in question on the east side of our property, the thing's lit up every night, all night. So they want to come to us about lighting, and do we have to come back here and do the same thing for me? I don't get it. They could have approached me. I don't ever have the lights on. Yes, there's some screening issues that we could probably fix. That would have been my intention anyhow. I just haven't got there yet. The building's not even complete.
Do you try to keep all your machinery that's outside in an orderly, neat?
I do. We park a couple trailers and a couple trucks. We do have a Bobcat. It's like, in the summertime, it's on site at all times, pretty much. We bring it back and forth. There are a few things. if we have supplies back and forth, but, you know, we keep a pretty nice looking place, so. And
Do you have another place for this porta potty that's more?
Well, if you saw the
secluded?
pictures, one of the pictures from, I don't know, last year or the year before, we've moved that. It's actually down by the building now. It's a gray one, not the blue one you saw in the one picture. But I mean, there's a big, there's two really large evergreen trees. We haven't tucked it into there yet. That was something that Mr. Wozniak had mentioned to me, so I don't have any issue with that. As far as Mr. Miller, the putting it inside, I don't think that's really feasible, because that thing will, you know, there's a little vent on those, so I don't know if that would be doable, but you know, we do a lot of entertaining down there, so we have that for my little kid. We use that. It's her potty down there, so we need it down there. It's where we put it, you know, I don't know if that's really a big deal. I mean, it's gray, it blends in pretty good.
Board members, last chance? No?
Sure, thank you.
I have a helper here because I'm fairly new at this. Does anyone want to speak in favor of this application? Okay, does anyone want to speak opposed to it? Okay. Anybody want to speak in general about it? Julie, is it my understanding you had a letter from them on this one or not? Oh, okay, all right. Okay, thank you. All right, at this time then, I guess we'll close the hearing and not take any further evidence. And did I get everything, Dave? Okay. And make a decision. Board members, what's your preference?
Ellen, do you feel that the staff report, the way it's constructed, is sufficient to ensure that there's reasonable oversight in this having a good outcome?
I believe that based on what the applicant stated about the porta potty having been moved a different color and has a proposed location that Mike talked to him about, that should be sufficient. I also think that the request to have the screening vegetative as described, it should be sufficient, and that the with Mike's approval, I would say at this point, with no other comments, that the hours of operation should stay from 6 a.m. to no later than 7 p.m. As the only thing you have mentioned, and I think that you would not have to change the ordinance to say that, but your comments about LED lighting being able to have a little less brightness or some adjustments to that effect, I think would fall within the purview of Mike's ability to review and make a adjustment that would be just within all. The point is to minimize the glare, and I think that is covered here. So no, I do not think that we should have any other changes on this as proposed, that the findings as proposed. Did you have something specific you wanted to ask me about, or more specific than that?
No, that's just wanted to ensure that we had recourse in case things didn't go well.
Okay.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to do something with this application.
I propose a motion to go with the staff recommendations and approve this conditional use permit.
I'll second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I think the neighbors need to understand.
Mike?
I think the neighbors need to understand that this is not an instant fix, but it will eventually happen. And I don't know, I guess that conversation would not take place until they receive another complaint, identified complaint.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously.
Give me a second to switch to the next report.
Julie, will this be ready for them to take home this afternoon, do you think, or you want to mail it to them?
We'll probably mail it. I believe we will mail it. I don't know. We should have them shortly, but I don't know if it'll be ready for the applicant. We would mail it regardless.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right.
Okay. Our next item on the agenda is for a Christine Rudder, represented by agent Ron Brenner, architect, and it is for 232 Cedar Drive West in the town of St. Joseph. The zoning district is the Lower St. Croix Riverway Overlay District, and the requests are, there are three requests for a variance to expand the non-conforming principal structure, which is not set back at least 40 feet from the bluff line, per section 17.36(1), 2, it could be an I, excuse me, I2E1 double I. And a variance to expand a non-conforming accessory structure, a deck, per section 17.36 I3B, and a conditional use permit for filling and grading within the 40 feet of the bluff line per section 17.36 F3A5. All the conditional use permit grading would be related to expanding the non-conforming principal structure. Again, the project is within the Lower St. Croix Riverway Overlay District. Which means it is subject to structures. The subject structures are located partially within the 40-foot bluff line setback area, but they are outside of the slope preservation zone. The project area is located outside of the shoreland zoning. Also, it's greater than 300 feet from the ordinary high water mark. It is a L-shaped lot, as you can see here. Here is some of the structures, and here is the structures in question down here. This is the house, and this is, there are two sheds on the property. So, wait a minute. Oh, it went the wrong way. It does that to us. There is a small history to inform you of regarding this property. In March of 2014, the applicant was granted two variance requests. Variance for reconstruction of the non-conforming accessory structure, the deck. The deck was reconstructed to meet the Uniform Dwelling Code requirements and was reduced in size and was reconstructed outside of the slope preservation zone. So it was smaller and then moved outside the slope preservation zone. A variance for expansion of the non-conforming principal structure was also granted at that time. The expansion included an entry foyer and a roof overhang on the landward side of the dwelling. This gives you another view of the overall site. As you can see, this is the bluff. It's all very steep. There is a lift going down to the bluff. Here is the residential structure. It's octagon shaped. This is the deck that wraps around it partially. This is the driveway configuration going back to a garage, which is back here, and then there were those two additional sheds and other structures out here. The mounting part in green is the proposed addition to the house, and then a portion of it is a proposed addition to the deck. Here we have a close-up of it. The addition is located away from the bluff and parallel to the bluff line, which is a requirement. It is not fully landward due to limited design options to connect to the house as an octagon. There are issues with connecting to the house. While the dwelling expansion is not within 40 feet of the bluff line, the construction limits will encroach within the bluff line setback. So the 40-foot limit, right, this is provides it. This dashed line right here shows where the 40-foot setback is at the closest point. Right here is the closest point going to that dashed line. Okay, so this green from this line back is residential addition. This also shows that the bluff line, of course, varies. It's not a straight line. And so it goes to 48 and 47.6 feet to this 40-foot setback line. It does not encroach within the bluff line setback. It does require, the filling and grading would require a conditional use permit because the filling and grading limits for this would go beyond this 40-foot line. This is a narrow lot at this point, as you can see on the overall view of the L shape. The grade of the lot gradually slopes away from the river at the top here. It has a flat area here at the top, and then it drains landward on the back side. And it also drains away from the bluff line and the slope preservation zone. These are some renderings of the expansion proposal. This is looking west. This is from the west elevation looking east. So this is what would be viewed from the river. You can see the deck is all along the front of the house, or maybe we would say the riverward side of the house. This is the elevation looking from the east elevation, looking towards the west. So this is the back side of the house. And then we go down, and here is south, and upper picture is south, lower picture is north. Elevations. All right, trying to get this all on here. The existing octagonal-shaped principal structure is non-conforming to the 40-foot bluff line setback. As you could see from that overview of the addition line, about 50% of the octagonal structure, perhaps actually a little more than 50% because the bluff line moves inward a little bit, is within the 40-foot setback. Non-conforming principal structures located in the bluff line setback area may be expanded if all of the criteria in section 17.36 I2E1 A through O are met. So there are a lot of criteria that have to be met, and we'll be going through those. Single-family dwellings are also subject to performance standards. The applicant will be required to submit a land use permit demonstrating all the performance standards are met if these variance requests are approved. Specific to this request, the principal structure is located wholly or partially within the bluff line setback, but not within the ordinary high watermark setback. This structure contains 5 additional standards for this specific type of nonconformity, and the variance is required for that, for one portion of it. This is approximately the location of the eastern corner of the proposed expansion. It comes from here, back, over, and then back in. So, expansion criteria. Structures located wholly or partially within 50 feet of the ordinary high water mark may not be expanded. Again, the structure is not located wholly or is located wholly outside of the 50 feet from the ordinary high water mark. It is no part, I'm going to go just to the blue ones. No part of the structure is located within the slope preservation zone. The structure is located outside of the 75 feet from the ordinary high water mark. The structure is set back more than 75 feet from the ordinary high water mark. The lot has an area of at least 7,000 square feet, which this does. It has 324,522 square feet. Non-conforming expansion and continued. The existing structure is visually inconspicuous. The applicant has submitted a site plan indicating existing and recent plantings on the bluff to further render the structure visually inconspicuous. 1 birch tree will be removed with the project, and there may be a need to remove 1 ash and 1 oak tree. This shows some of the plantings, shows some of the tree overhang on both sides, gives you a view of what the structure looks like. So this also meets number G, the existing foundation is more than 50 feet from the ordinary high water mark and is not within a slope preservation zone, so it may be altered in conjunction with the proposed expansion. However, it also may not exceed 1,500 square feet, but the structure is not within the ordinary high water mark setback, so this standard does not apply. The total footprint of the structure will be 1,937 square feet. Structure is located wholly or partially within the bluff line setback, which this one is, but not within the ordinary high water mark setback, may not exceed 2,000 square feet. So this structure shall comply with all of that requirements. It has a total square footage proposed of 1,937. So this gives us a little better drawing. The structure is set back, the new structure, the proposed structure, is set back at least 40 feet from the bluff line. That's one of the requirements. The existing portion of the structure is not. As I said, you can see how the bluff line is very varied through here. The deck at one point gets very close to it. The 40 feet is way back here. It's indicated by this line and the 40-foot that's highlighted. And so if you draw that line straight across, which it would not be, you'd have to draw it at an angle to meet the bluff line. But you can see about half of the structure and all of the deck are within the 40 feet. The new structure, however, outlined in blue, will be back 40 feet or more from the bluff line. Visibility of the structure, it may not protrude above the bluff line as viewed from at or near the midline of the river or 250 feet riverward from the ordinary high water mark, whichever is less. The applicants have submitted a rendering. A little hard to see all of this, but the rendering produced by the applicant's agent does not protrude above the bluff line as viewed from 250 feet riverward of the ordinary high water mark. The addition is proposed to be lower in height than the existing structure. So what we're looking at here is, does the addition visible from the ordinary 250 feet out? And the addition would not be because it has a lower roof line and it's back here. So. The structure is not located within the slope preservation zone. No, it is not. The existing structure is a cedar tone color, and any addition will match that color, which is an earth tone color that meets the rules of the riverway. Existing vegetation renders the structure visually inconspicuous, and only one tree located away from the bluff line is expected to be removed. The existing driveway, sidewalk, and well are on the back, landward side of the house, limiting design options. The octagon shape also limits connection options for the addition. The proposed location is roughly parallel to the bluff line and slightly landward. Therefore, it meets the standard that any addition or expansion has to be farthest from the river, and landward is not possible. The expansion must be parallel to the ordinary high water mark or bluff line. And it is a little bit of both, or mostly both, excuse me. There's another rendering, also this showing the visibility from the river with vegetation. You can see 250 feet and the view, and again, the vegetation is such that it screens. The existing is over in here, but here's the addition back here. And so it would screen the addition. All right. The height of the altered or reconstructed structure complies with 17.36 G4. The height will be lower than the height of the existing dwelling and will comply with the height requirement of 35 feet in the rural residential management zone. The expansion portion will match the color of the existing dwelling. Some of these are a bit redundant. The applicant has submitted a map with existing planting locations which expands on the required mitigation within the application. Very little mitigation will be required, as the project will involve minimal impacts to resources and does not pose much erosion potential. The existing grade of the site drains landward in the proposed project area, and the gutters will be installed to direct runoff away from the bluff and the river. The expansion, if approved, will require a land use permit. The applicant shall file the mitigation plan with the land use permit application, and will submit stormwater and erosion control plans at that time also. This has a planting slide on it. It's some planting that the applicant has done in anticipation of this addition. So the red dots, if you can see them on here, are all additional trees, and the blue dots in here are all additional shrubs that have been planted. And the yellow area highlighted indicates over in here areas that have been seeded. In this case, it says naturalized area, no longer mowed, is what I would take that to mean. Right. The private wastewater treatment system on the property is compliant. The addition will not involve creating any additional bathrooms, therefore that should be, the sizing is fine. They may need to relocate the septic tank or drain field due to the size of the lot. but ample space is available for replacement pouts elsewhere on the property, provided a new soil test is completed. Filling or grading is not allowed. Disturbance when reconstructing, except as necessary to reconstruct or build in compliance with other provisions of this chapter, or to upgrade or replace that sanitary system. So therefore, disturbance beyond what is necessary to complete the expansion and maintain connection to the pouts will not be done. So I would like to pause at this point and ask if you had any questions on that first variance request before we talk about the second variance request. As this is kind of a long report. The first one had to do with the principal structure. No? Okay, no problem. Going on to the second variance request, which is for the accessory structure, the attached deck. That is also, as I pointed out, non-conforming to the bluff line setback. If a variance to allow the principal structure expansion is granted, a gap would be left between the existing footprint of the deck and also the stairs off the deck and the addition to the dwelling. The applicants propose to add decking to replace the existing stairs and connect along the full length of the addition to the length of the deck, plus add a little bit more to the deck, a total of approximately 30 feet long by 6 feet wide. Removal of the existing stairs and expansion of the existing deck to connect with the addition requires a variance. Where the existing deck and the new deck would connect to the addition would not meet the 40-foot bluff line setback, the entire length of that addition. There are little portions of it that might, but not in that specific area. We do not permit expansion of non-conforming accessory structures except garages and storage sheds, so a variance is required to expand the deck and to permit that part of the deck expansion within the 40-foot bluff line setback. So this variance actually, if it's approved, would accomplish two things: permitting the deck expansion and permitting the deck expansion within the 40-foot bluff line setback. Just wanted to make sure that was clear. Here is a diagram illustrating where the proposed deck expansion would and would not meet the 40-foot setback from the bluff line. Here's the existing deck. Here's the stairs that would be taken out. This, from all of this area all the way over to here, would not meet it. Would all be less than the 40-foot setback. There already is a small connection to, apparently that was there to get into a doorway of some kind here in this area, and so there is a small extension of the deck that could be utilized to go into the addition. This area would meet it, but it would be standalone because this area has a setback from, barely would meet it. This is 40 foot, 7.5 inches, and this is 41 foot, 8.5 inches. So this portion of the proposed deck would. Not sure if there would be any reason to approve this portion when it would not connect to this portion. So it's about 30 feet. The ordinance permits structures outside of the 40-foot setback and within 100 feet of the bluff line. Performance standards in section 17.36H must also be met for accessory structures. So there would be additional standards that it would have to meet if approved. Let's see, that did not go down like it's supposed to. There. Standards that it would have to meet include neither the existing portion of the deck nor the proposed expansion portion of the deck protrude above the bluff line. So they are mostly not visible from the midline of the river or the 250-foot riverward from the ordinary high water mark. It is not located in the slope preservation zone. It's outside of it. It will match the existing deck color, which is earth tone, which is also the color of the house. And the deck is visually inconspicuous with the existing vegetation at this time, the existing deck. So now we have other agency reviews. The town of St. Joseph has met and voted recommendation to approve both variance requests. And we also have a letter from the Department of Natural Resources, Mike Wenholtz. And I would not read the whole letter, but I would like to read the recommendation from Mr. Wenholtz into the record as requested by him. I'm on the second page 2, just going to start near the top there. The applicant does not request for addition to the non-conforming principal structure. The applicant does not appear to demonstrate that a unique property limitation exists for this request. A unique physical limitation is to be from the property, not where a structure sits on the property. From air photos and past experience, there are other properties within the Lower St. Croix Riverway Overlay District, including adjacent properties with steep slopes and the associated slope preservation zone bluffline and bluffline setback. The department is not sure the applicant has demonstrated that an unnecessary hardship exists for this request. The applicant wanting additional office and storage space and different living room and bedroom space, while understandable, are circumstances or desires of the applicant, not issues with the property. The ordinance does allow interior remodeling for these purposes. Further, the applicant does not address why the desired office and bedroom space could not be met at a compliant location somewhere else on the property. Thus, it appears the property as a whole may not have been considered. Finally, nothing in the application narrative demonstrates that the request is for the minimum relief necessary, nor does the request for expansion appear to be the minimum relief necessary. Unless the applicant can demonstrate there is a unique property limitation, the property as a whole has been considered, and the request for the minimum relief necessary, the request is for the minimum relief necessary, the department, meaning the DNR, does not believe the three variance criteria have been met and recommends this request be denied. If this request is denied, then the department recommends the conditional use permit request also be denied. Request for extension of the non-conforming accessory structure deck. The applicant wanting to extend the deck to be adjacent to the requested addition, while understandable, is a circumstance or desire of the applicant, not an issue with the property. Further, as noted above, it does not appear that a unique property limitation exists for this request. For these reasons and the reasons and recommendations stated in the staff report, the department, DNR, recommends this request be denied. So, Board of Adjustment action. After contemplating all relevant information, you may do one of the following: approve the request with or without conditions, deny the request, table or postpone the decision to absorb information gathered, or request additional information. The Board of Adjustment must stipulate findings to support their decision for approval or denial, and you must take separate action and stipulate findings to support their decision for each of the two variance requests as indicated on our agenda. Applicable statutes and criteria. We're going to be going through these specifically one by one as to how it does or does not meet, the application does or does not meet these. So unless there's any questions, I will not read these at this time. I would note, though, at the bottom that we do separate from the criteria based on numerous law and court cases. The Board of Adjustment may grant only the minimum variance needed. Findings of fact and conclusions of law. The property owner is Christine Rudder. The agent is Ron Brenner Architects. The site is located at 232 Cedar Drive West, Hudson, Wisconsin, in the town of St. Joseph. The subject property is approximately 7.45 acres in size and is located within the Lower St. Croix Riverway Overlay District. The applicant filed an application with the St. Croix County Board of Adjustment for a variance for the following: Section 17.36 I2E 1II, expansion of a principal structure nonconforming to the bluffline setback. Also, Section 17.36 I3B, expansion of an accessory structure deck nonconforming to the bluffline setback. Mike Wenholtz, Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, has provided written comments and which recommend denial of both variances. Summarize that. The expanded portions of both the deck and dwelling will meet all other applicable standards in Section 17.I2E1 and Section 17.36H, provided the applicants submit compliant stormwater plans with the required land use permit. The Town of St. Joseph met on 6/8/2023 and voted to recommend approval of both variance requests. To qualify for a variance, the applicant has the burden of proof to demonstrate that all three requirements defined in state statutes are met. Unnecessary hardship. The existing house and deck were constructed prior to the adoption of the Lower St. Croix Riverway Overlay District and are legal nonconforming structures. The applicant's request is dictated by the location of existing structures and the topography of the site. Unique property limitations. The lot has a narrow layout with a relatively flat area atop the bluff, which aids in developing the lot in a visually inconspicuous manner. The grade of the lot gradually slopes away from the river, therefore drains landward, protecting the bluff line and the slope preservation zone. Alternatives available to the applicant do include continuing to use the deck and the house in its current layout, relocating the house and deck out of the bluff line setback to a compliant location on the property. However, this would create greater land disturbance adjacent to the slope preservation zone and may be unnecessarily burdensome if they had to remove the existing house. No harm to public interest. The request will meet the intent of the Riverway Overlay District in that threat of soil erosion or surface water and groundwater pollution or contamination is very low with this request due to the topography of the lot. The existing structures and the addition portions will not be visible from the river. The applicant has demonstrated or will demonstrate with the submittal of a land use permit that all other standards for structures have been met. The additions will allow property value to be maintained in a manner which will cause minimal disturbance to the land. A variance shall not grant or extend, increase any use prohibited in the district. This is a single-family dwelling with related accessory structures which are permitted. The existing structure is not in conformance with all applicable standards. However, all portions of the dwelling expansion will be in conformance. A portion of the proposed deck expansion will remain within the 40 feet of the bluff line setback. Allowing expansion of the deck within the 40 feet bluff line setback will perpetuate and extend the nonconformity and does not allow for only the minimum relief necessary to continue the use of the deck as proposed. Be granted for a hardship or solely based on economic gain. This request does not appear to be based solely on economic gain or loss, as the approval or denial of the request will not change how the property is utilized. Be granted for a hardship with which is self-created. The existing house and deck were constructed prior to the adoption of the Lower St. Croix Riverway Overlay District and are legal non-conforming structures. Therefore, the applicant's request is dictated by the location of the existing structures and the topography of the site. Granting of these requests does not impact the view or create possible contamination to the river or other parcels, so it does not damage the rights or property values of other people in the area. This is not a criteria that is applicable regarding appropriate amendments to this ordinance or associated map. Altering of a historic district, again, the criteria is not applicable to this variance request. Based on the findings of fact and conclusions of law, the requested variance to expand a nonconforming principal structure does meet all of the three applicable statutory criteria and the applicable criteria set forth in 17.76E of the Riverway Ordinance to grant a variance. However, the variance request to expand the nonconforming deck does not meet all applicable criteria. Therefore, staff recommend approval of the variance for expansion of a principal structure nonconforming to the bluff line setback and denial of the variance for an expansion of an accessory structure nonconforming to the bluff line setback. And I would just add that, again, the principal structure's nonconformity will not be increased because it will all be, the addition will all be conforming to the bluff line setback, whereas the deck addition would not all be conforming to the bluff line setback. Staff recommendations find that the variance meets the ordinance and statutory requirements. If the board can make the necessary findings to support each variance request, then the board may consider granting the request. The following recommendations are provided for the board's consideration. The applicant shall apply for a land use permit per section 17.36 F2A1 prior to commencing any part of this project. A stormwater management plan approved by the Community Development Department shall be designed and implemented with that permit. The applicant shall secure any necessary permits and or approvals from the town of St. Joseph and attain any other required local, state, or federal permits and approvals. The applicant shall have 1 year from the issuance of these approvals to commence reconstruction of the deck and 2 years to complete the project. If the deck is denied, we would need to go back and edit this, and we would edit it regardless depending on a couple of the things that are in here. So, failure to do so will result in expiration or revocation of this decision, after which time the applicant will be required to secure a new variance. These conditions may be amended or additional conditions may be added if unanticipated circumstances arise that would affect the health and/or safety of citizens and/or degrade the natural resources of St. Croix County. Conditions will not be amended or added without notice to the applicant and an opportunity for a public hearing. Any new owners must adhere to the standards. Any change or to the conditions or project shall require review by the zoning administrator. Accepting this decision means that the applicant has read and understand and agrees to all conditions of this decision and has no objections to county staff conducting unannounced on-site inspections for compliance with this permit. Any questions?
Going back to the first variance, you mentioned there's a couple trees have got to be removed, but they're not near the bluff line if they're in the back of the house.
Actually, the one tree that has to be removed is behind the house, is landward. It does not clarify where the other two trees are. Mike might have known where those two are, and those are possibly need to be removed. So I suggest that would be a question to ask the property owner where the oak, I believe it was an oak and a maple, that may need to be removed are located.
And that would be the only disturbance of vegetation outside of the sod they're going to dig up?
I would believe that would be so. Obviously, there would be some disturbance of the lawn and perhaps some plantings that exist right now. If we go back to the photos or even look at here, this, as they said, there's one tree, maybe it's this one, maybe not, maybe it's this one. I would assume perhaps this one that would have to be removed. And as they said, there may be two others. And it might be this one, I don't know, or I would back up and say then if the deck was denied, this one would not have to be removed.
And then help me out on the DNR's comments here. I find it kind of interesting because in 2014, we granted them the addition on the deck. So
We did not grant an addition to the deck. In 2014, we denied, they had to reduce the size of the deck. So they did not add onto the deck, we added onto the house. And what they did is, that similar to what's being proposed today, they put in an entry foyer and a roof overhang on the landward side of the dwelling. Again, not in the 40-foot setback, bluff line setback. It's on page 114.
I don't know what
Depending on what you did, if you printed it or not.
yeah, I do have it.
So the deck was reconstructed to meet the Uniform Dwelling Code, and that is probably why we granted the variance. There was a safety issue, but it was reduced in size, and it was moved. It's still in the bluff line setback, but it was removed outside of the slope preservation zone, so it was definitely made smaller.
Yes, I see where it says reduced in size.
And then the number 2 says that the nonconforming structure was expanded similar to today's request on the landward side with a foyer. So if we go down to this more close-up, if you're looking back here, I believe there's some kind of addition somewhere along this house. I don't know where, perhaps in this area, but it was the landward side. And looking at where the walkway is, this concrete walkway, I would hazard that that is probably where it is, but definitely should ask the applicant to confirm that. Back from 2014.
And the DNR's concern here is that it's too close to the river, basically, right?
The DNR has 3 concerns. It's a unique, there are the 3 tests for there are 3 tests, and they believe it does not meet 2 of the 3 tests, and it has to meet all 3. They also believe it's not the minimum necessary, and so, which is also another requirement. So the unique property limitation that the county staff identified is that it was within, and I think he somewhat, he disagrees with us, but the unique property limitation that we suggested is that it slopes away from the river in the area where the addition will be. He identifies that that's not that unique. And that is something that the board should consider, his opinion, that it's not that unique. He also suggests that the unnecessary hardship exists for this request. We identified the hardship being that the property the house was constructed prior to the St. Croix Riverway Overlay District being created back in 1974. And he is suggesting that while that may be true, it is not an unnecessary hardship because the property owner has compliant locations. They could build a whole new house somewhere on this property, okay? They have 7+ acres. They could meet their needs by leaving this structure alone, remodeling it without adding on, and then building a compliant house back in some other spot. And using this perhaps as a additional structure. That's what he's suggesting.
Yeah.
He says the property as a whole may not have been considered. So he looks at it from the minimum relief necessary. You know, is this the smallest possible addition they could do? That kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Is what he's looking at it as. He does not believe the 3 variance criteria have all been met, and recommends the request be denied.
But moving the structure is not real practical. I mean,
no, it's not. But perhaps he feels that. Perhaps he's implying. He doesn't say that the addition is going to be expensive, and perhaps it'd be more practical or more appropriate to build a new structure, a compliant structure, at a compliant location somewhere else on the property.
well, the part where they want to add on the house, it slopes away from the river.
Yes.
As you've already, I mean, I don't see why that's a problem.
That's what the staff agreed with that. Any other questions for me, or would you like to continue with it?
Doesn't appear as such.
Okay. I will leave this one up here for now, and we can move it if needed.
I do have a question real quick. How do we provide the information to the DNR so that they can make a decision?
The DNR does not need to make a decision. They are providing you with a recommendation and a comment. You make the decision.
Yeah, no, I mean, do we forward them the proposed application or parts of it, or what do we give them so that they can have something to analyze?
I see. We give them the application shortly after we determine that it's fully complete, and we also send them our staff report. And if the beginning of his letter on the first page, Mike noted that he appreciated the opportunity to review the staff report, and he actually met with our staff via Teams meeting, online meeting, to discuss both this application and the one that was postponed in greater detail to understand.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next I guess we can hear from the applicants.
Good morning, I'm Christine Rudder. And would you like to, could I clear up anything for you before I read a little bit of something that I had prepared?
Any questions right offhand?
I was just interested in that oak tree you're going to cut down.
Right.
Is that what the architect told you has to happen?
No, actually, it's just, actually, it was the arborist from Save a Tree, because I asked if we could leave that tree. And he said, you can leave it, but don't be surprised if it dies. I figure that we don't really have anything to lose by leaving it. But if you see the word deck addition, you'll just kind of see the oak tree that's popped in the corner. So if you're out there and you see how much the ground slopes away, there's very minimal digging and grading that needs to be done. So to me, since we really like the tree, it's a lovely tree, we're going to try to leave it, but at least it's far enough back from the bluff line that it's not on the bluff line. The other tree that is not a terribly high value tree is an ash tree, because all the ash trees on the place are slowly one by one dying. So that's what we have for trees that would subsequently possibly be removed because of the addition.
And then I also had a question about the deck. I question about why that needs to be expanded. Obviously, the room, the outdoor activities, the picnics and things you can do on your deck.
Sure.
I totally understand that, but in light of the fact that it's so close to the edge.
So the deck, so in 2014, I did a cosmetic remodel of the house. The upper living area of the house is cantilevered over the lower level. So when we say that we added on to make a foyer, what we actually did was nothing was actually added on per se, but instead of right over the front door of there being a cantilever, we just took the wall straight down. And all it did was give us about a 3-foot deeper front entryway. Because when I bought the house, it had a spiral staircase. So in the center of the house, we took out a big double-sided fireplace and then put a staircase up to the living area. So because of where that staircase had to come down, code-wise, structure-wise, when you entered the house, you were within like 3 feet of the front step. So we asked if we could take that cantilevered area and just come straight down from it to put a front door in. So that's what was going on. And then when we asked for that permit, the deck itself was in terrible disrepair. The deck used to be, actually, it came out even further to the southwest. That was all taken down and removed, and then the deck was moved back. So it was actually reduced inside. And actually the deck even wrapped around even further around the house. So it was reduced quite a bit. So that's where the whole deck thing came into play.
Is that the proposed deck, the most western portion of that deck, would the slope still be away from the river?
The entire bluffline slopes away from the river. My entire property. The bluffline is the highest point, and it all slopes back. Mike Wozniak and Kelly were out and did a physical walk around and talked about how I would have no storm water going into either property. I have no storm water that would go naturally down the bluff. I have no storm water that leads to any ravine that leads back to the river. The stormwater could be actually very easily managed. And I'm sorry, Ellen? Ellen's comment about my badly spelled naturalized area, that's not actually just not mown. That's actually been planted by me. There's sedge, there's anything that'll live in shade. I mean, it's all native product that I've gotten either from Prairie Nursery, which are all native. Those are 2 native nurseries that I buy seed and plugs from. And then I've probably, in the last 2 years, put, I would say between native shrubs and native trees, and some vines, I have planted at least 100 native trees and shrubs in that area. They're small, and unless you walked around and looked at all the deer cages, you probably wouldn't even notice. But it's actually a truly valuable area if what you're trying to do is, facilitate insects, birds, and wildlife. And that's my hope for the vast majority of my property. Any of the mown areas, this property actually used to be top to bottom just buckthorn and diseased trees. So a lot of what I mow right now is simply because it was all old buckthorn. And it's the only way that I can kind of keep control of things until I'm able to actually financially get to planting stuff, because it's hard work and it's a lot of money and it's very stubborn. But what I like about my property is that it does feel like a nature reserve, and I do very much want to keep that. So when I think about the option that, okay, maybe you could put it, let's say you tear out an entire house and put another one up to gain 40 feet, that seems incredibly disrupting to what I feel it should be our overall vision to that conservation area and really sort of greater good of what the public would like to see, in our environment.
The mentioned it was a request for a 6-foot deck all the way across. Would there be some options maybe of not necessarily having to be 6 feet all the way across, some adjustments to?
Right, well, it's, so because where the deck, it's not colored, right where the word deck is, that's where the steps come down now. So that already has a deck surface, so to speak, on it. And then really what's not in compliance is sort of that little pie shape. And then the rest of that, it's just within compliance, but it still is within compliance. And really, I mean, the reason that we're asking for that, and as you can see, it's not that we're asking for more deck, we're just asking for a walkway that just when you walk out of the office, that you can actually then access the deck. And true, we can, I'm willing to work around that. Yeah. That's not a big deal at all to me.
Ellen, could you bring up packet page 175?
Sure. Excuse me for just a moment, please. Got smaller on me.
It did.
Yeah. I'm just going to go to this one real quick, put it back to the right size. Oh, here we go. There we go. Thank you. Yeah, I was just looking for it. It's 194.
Oh,
I know. I was just trying to get the numbers back to where I could read them. That's all.
It's both of us.
175. Are you sure that that's almost there? 76, 77. Yep, there it is. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's too big. There.
Okay, so it's my understanding then where those hatch lines are, those are actually the steps to go from the ground level up to the deck right now.
Correct.
And then the walkway that you want to put in is the white part in blue there where it says deck modified to fill in the existing stair. Right above the black line there.
And then along the gutter spout, the gutter to downspout, that dotted line, we asked for a small walkway, you know, to exit, to actually enter the deck from the addition, or to exit the addition from, you know, that area. But yes, the big bank of stairs are there. I guess mostly it's just an awkward, leaving it without an addition to the deck just felt awkward, and it looks awkward because you're exiting your deck into kind of the wall of your addition.
Okay, so the white area that would be the walkway and the brown existing deck are the same height?
Correct.
Okay.
So if you're going to do that, that means removing the existing steps?
Well, honestly, would we even have to? I'm not a contractor, but I look at that and think to myself, well, couldn't you just build over them? I mean, the footings are already there, and it's just a deck. It's not supporting anything other than humans and lawn furniture. So, I mean, I honestly, I would not care if there was steps under there. That does not bother me. That I have visual screens for my neighbors in every way, shape, or form. I am very sensitive to what other people see when they look onto my property, because when I look onto other people's property, I don't want to see their junkiness. So for me, if the stairs stayed there, I mean, my plan for it is I immediately would have choke cherry or American cranberry or something that had high native, you know, wildlife value. That's what I want all the way around my house. So if stairs were there, I wouldn't see them. And if I can't see them, nobody else can see them. And if I needed to put some very inconspicuous screening in front of it, I would do it. But to me, the less disruption to any of the dirt around there is my priority. And I have planted that place that puts money where my mouth is, because I have put hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars into native seed and seeded all the way around there. Countless thousands of dollars to remove buckthorn. So, I mean, I really am truly sensitive to what I have going on around me.
Okay, you mentioned you had a written thing you'd like to?
I do.
Okay.
So I first wanted to thank you for your thoughtfulness and time in your consideration for us asking for a variance. That's very sincere. So I wanted to reiterate that I'm asking the board for a variance to conservatively enlarge a legal non-conforming principal structure, i.e. an area variance, and I'm here to prove unnecessary hardship or unnecessary burdensome status. Hardship due to unique property limitations and no harm to public interests. Wisconsin courts state unnecessarily burdensome concurrently with unnecessary hardship. If left unable to conservatively expand our home, our choice would be to tear the house down and build another roughly 40 feet back from where the home now sits. To do so would require the removal of at least 13 60-foot trees. And I can show you where those are on. They're not all well mapped on the survey, but I can assure you they're there. There would be a removal of a septic field, removal of asphalt, cement, moving underground gas, electricity, and cable, and leave questionable access to the well. In addition, I ask you to take into account the monumental waste incurred of tearing down a usable home, siding, roofing, cabinets, windows, flooring, tile, plumbing, all of it, and throwing it into a construction dump site. The site destruction and management of said destruction would far exceed what small expansion would result in. The Riverway Overlay District is in place to protect the scenic nature of the St. Croix, to protect water quality, and to protect habitat. Our request would not negatively impact the intent of this law in any fashion. As to hardship due to unique property limitations, the home was built prior to the Scenic River Waterways zoning. It's situated where it is due to no illegal actions of the previous owner or myself. Again, I point to the destruction to the land in not being able to use the home, meaning I would have to destroy the land if I couldn't use the home that's there in a far greater degree than adding on to it. I would ask that you consider the value of authorizing at least a minimum variance that would afford relief and would represent the least modification to the land and the environment. Lastly, no harm to public addition or to public interest. In addition to our home as presented would not impact the river in any way, be it fish and wildlife habitat, water quality, scenic beauty, or any other public interest. I would argue that the impact of tearing down a home, hauling it off, and building another as an affront to public interest. The excess pounding on the roads, the impact on the neighborhoods, the waste of resources when all around us there are fires, storms, shortages of housing, all calling for building materials. To waste what we have seems wrong in a way I can't completely define. Again, I would like to sincerely thank the board and staff for the time and thoughtfulness and consideration. I'm sorry, I'm not a public speaker, for our application.
Board members, any more questions? Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Is there anyone that wants to speak in favor of this application? Step up to the podium and identify yourself, please.
Thank you. I'm Ron Brenner Architects. Let's see, I just wanted to clarify a couple of items that have come up in the discussion here today. Again, thank you for your attention to this application. One thing I wanted to point out is we collaborated with the county. We've had several meetings with the county and have actually adjusted the design per county comments. Some of the original designs had the addition coming off of this corner right there instead of halfway back. Those additions would have been a little more structurally straightforward, if you will, in the way that we connected to the house. And they would have also offered a little better circulation flow from the house to the addition. But based on county comments, we moved the addition basically further away from the river or from the bluff line to address those comments. So we did look at multiple schemes. I do feel like this represents a minimal, to address the DNR comment, a minimal addition. We are actually capturing very little, modest amount of additional living space, living room space. We have an office that is needed. We have a homeowner that works from home. The current setup just does not work, and so we've looked at that in a way to try to keep that minimal, and we're complying with all the regulations relative to that too. In terms of the deck, I just want to clarify that this stair and all the red is existing deck, which is, for the most part, non-compliant. What we were, if we leave the stair and not do any additional deck, then we all of a sudden have a stair kind of pointing towards the house, which is an odd feature, if you will. So our only intent was to literally just make a connection across here and be able to walk out this end. Now, we said 6 feet here. The 6 feet was, well, that we think got us to fully comply with the 40-foot requirement. I think, sorry, I need my cheaters. So from the bluff line on this line right here, the house is 48 feet, but the edge of the deck is 42 feet from the bluff line. So for this white extension, at least in this zone, does comply with that 40-foot requirement. It's only this little patch of white area where we're literally just trying to connect it to the office. So there's a zone right in here that's new build that does not meet that 40-foot requirement. We think that's reasonable, and that it's all landward from the existing deck, and it's simply being utilized to make a connection across here. I think we could make that 5 foot deep instead of 6 foot deep and still have a nice connection across the way. We'd have to ask our clients if that was okay, but it is currently compliant for the most part with that with the 40 foot. And then in terms of just the DNR commentary, I think Chris already pointed out, it would be massively more destructive to the land if we were to demolish this house and build a new one. The property as a whole has been considered. In addition to the idea of a new house, we looked at additions on the other sides of the octagon. Those additions would have either been closer to the river or closer to the bluff line, or they would have intruded on driveways and required a lot more, again, regrading, reworking of the site topography. And in the end, this location was deemed as the most logical, least disruptive place and most modest way to accommodate our clients' needs.
Okay, do you have a feel at all for how narrow the walkway would have to be to get the little triangular area into compliance with 40 feet from the bluff line?
Well, the triangular area, this little area has to do with the way that the bluff, and this is a unique topographic feature, the bluff line, instead of kind of carrying across at a consistent angle, it actually juts forward towards the house. And so it's because that bluff line at this location is closer to the house. This little triangle right here will always be closer than 40 feet as the current steps are currently.
So no matter if you drop that to a 5 foot, that's not going to change that. Then you're still going to end up with the same.
Correct. We could change it to 2 feet, and which you can't walk across, but it would still have a little sliver of greater than or less than 40 feet.
Yeah. Now that I see you explain that, I have no concern there. The other thing I really like is the fact that leaving those stairs be and not try to disturb that. It would make.
Board members, any other questions?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone want to speak in opposition to this application?
Excuse me, but we do have another comment in favor.
Sure.
So we did receive a written comment that I want to read into the record. This was received from Greg Woolforth, 237 Cedar Drive West, Hudson, Wisconsin, 54016. And it says, "My name is Greg Woolforth, resident at 237 Cedar Drive West, Hudson, Wisconsin, 54016. I have received notice of Christine Rudder's request for a conditional use permit and variance at 232 Cedar Drive West, Hudson, Wisconsin, 54016. Since you have offered input, please accept my approval as a neighbor of Christine Rudder and her requests. I have no objection. I would also add, since moving to North Hudson, which he isn't actually in North Hudson, but maybe he meant north of Hudson, just over 2 years ago, I have found Christine to be an excellent caretaker of her property, engaged in our neighborhood community, and contributing to my overall positive experience as a resident in St. Croix County. Kind regards, Greg Woolforth."
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And then I would add that as St. Croix County Parks also are adjoining property owners to this property, and we also received notice. And as a representative of St. Croix County Parks, we have no objection to the residential addition, but I do think that the structure should not increase the nonconformity, and some other alternative should be figured out for the deck rather than adding on. So that would be my comment from St. Croix County Parks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, does anyone want to speak in opposition to the application? Does anyone have a general comment about it? Okay, it's 10 after 11. We will close this hearing and not take any further testimony. Board, I think we want to treat these as definitely two separate variance items and make a decision on each one on its own merits. So I'm open for discussion.
I guess I was a little reluctant on that deck, but the logic in the argument seems very persuasive, and I've viewed the property. It's well taken care of, and it was pre-existing. I guess I don't see a real fault in wanting to just put that minimal deck on there. But that's just my thought.
And what's your thoughts on the addition?
I have no problem with that.
I have no problem with the addition either. Where the property lays, it slopes away from the edge of the bluff line, and I do have trouble with the deck. I don't, this house is located in a unique area as far as the county. All these houses along the river, and they have to dance to a different tune because of it. Because it's susceptible to washing, it's susceptible to loss of vegetation and all sorts of things, and I think we have to respect that, and I don't see that this does anything. There are at least two entrances, if I'm looking at this correctly, to that deck, plus from the house, which gives them three. And but the addition on the house, I don't have a trouble with that because of the way it lays. This lady has a lovely dog too, good watchdog.
Sorry about
that. I think in defense of that deck, I think the fact that they moved the addition with input from the county, and then they end up with a stair that's facing the new addition, I think that, in my mind, justifies the need for that deck.
Mr. Telejohn, have you got an input one way or the other?
I'll tell you when I vote.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and take a vote on the addition and see where that falls. I'll take a motion on that, one way or the other?
I'll move that we approve the addition as presented.
I'll second that.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the addition? Okay, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
And all opposed? And there are none. Unanimous approval for the addition. Thank you.
I move we deny the second variances on the deck. I don't see that that is needful. And it's in violation of the 40-foot setback anyway, and I just don't see that it's that needful. And more importantly, let me repeat, it's in violation.
Sounds like that's going to be a decision for me to make. Okay, I'll second that motion. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Nay. The motion is defeated to deny the deck, 3-1. Where do we go from here, Dave?
So now I think because that motion was denied, then if someone is inclined to make a motion to approve the deck, I think that would be the next step.
I'll make the motion that we approve the deck
I'll
as
second.
outlined in the drawings here.
Okay, motion made and seconded. All in favor, or any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
We have 3 ayes and 1 opposition. Motion is carried.
So I would note that we will have to rework the findings slightly to accommodate the deck not meeting the 40-foot setback. So we'll have to rework those a little bit. So we won't really have those ready for you if you want to review them as a board beforehand.
Okay, I can stop by tomorrow or Monday or sometime to look them over.
I understand, but does the rest of the board members want to see them before they're signed?
I guess I'm comfortable with the fact that Joe knows what the intent was in our decision there, and if he's satisfied, at least I would be, I guess.
If you just want to send an email quick, that's fine.
Okay. So it may
Okay,
be a little longer to get them done.
all right. Next agenda item is,
The conditional use permit for the Rudders.
for which?
For the same property.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. Go ahead.
Just a sec. Grab the right paperwork. No, I think the opening statement was wrong. That's why. Here we go. Okay. So this report starts out the same. Same initial information and the same location map and site history. So I will just go through those very quickly. And again, this is for a conditional use permit for filling and grading within 40 feet of the bluff line per section 17.36 F3A5. Again, the site history, proposed site plan is the same. The filling and grading within the 40 feet would require the conditional use permit because it would extend as part of actually constructing the structure in this area. And as it states here, if the variances are approved, which they have been, the conditional use permit is required to fill and grade within 40 feet of the slope preservation zone in association with the construction of the addition onto the principal structure and the deck, per section 17.36 F3A5. Okay, sorry. Applicable performance standards, there can be no wetlands in the proximity to the project area, except as permitted by section 17.36 F3A5 with a conditional use permit, as is this request. There could otherwise be no filling and grading. Any vegetation that is removed must be replaced with native vegetation. There is one tree that is expected to be removed and can be replaced. Removal of 2 additional trees may be necessary. Those would also have to be replaced. Again, there is expected to be very minimal disturbance within the 40-foot setback, except as required with construction equipment to complete the work, as the projects will abut right up to the 40-foot setback line for the whole length of the addition and will be within the 40-foot setback for portions of the deck. Activities are not anticipated to be close to the actual bluff line. The project area does drain landward. All standards are met. That was covered on the previous slides. The other additionals, the owner shall submit a stormwater management plan and erosion and sediment control plan per 17.36H7 with the conditional use permit. These are not received with this application at this time, as the applicant did not wish to proceed with contracting a professional to complete this work if the variance requests were not approved. As stated previously, a land use permit will be required if these requests are approved, and the applicant has provided a written statement indicating that full stormwater and erosion control plans will be submitted with the land use permit. County staff and the county's contracted stormwater review consultant, Stantec, will review these plans as part of the land use permit to ensure compliance with the Riverway ordinance. Again, the town of St. Joseph has provided comments, and they met on 6/8/2023 and voted to recommend approval of the conditional use permit requests. The Department of Natural Resources had qualified by saying that they recommended denial if the variances were denied, and I don't believe they had a comment if they were approved. The Board of Adjustment may approve the request, deny the request, table or postpone to consider additional information. No conditional use permit shall violate the spirit or general intent of the ordinance, be allowed, which would be contrary to the public health, safety, or general welfare, or substantially adverse to property values in the neighborhood, would be permitted for something that would constitute a nuisance by reason of noise, dust, smoke, odor, or other similar factors, and which must follow all the standards which apply to this class of use. Findings of fact, conclusions of law for your consideration. The property owner is Christine Rudder. The agent is Ron Brenner Architects. 232 Cedar Drive West is the site, town of St. Joseph. Property is 7.45 acres and is located within the lower St. Croix Riverway Overlay District. The application was filed for a conditional use permit to fill and grade within the 40-foot setback of the slope preservation zone. The CUP request is in conjunction with requests to expand the non-conforming deck and the principal structure. The applicant meets the standards for filling and grading listed in 17.36H5 with the exception of stormwater and erosion control plans. If approved, the applicant must apply for a land use permit and submit the stormwater and erosion control plan with that document application. No grant of a conditional use permit shall violate the spirit or general intent. Filling and grading within the 40-foot setback of the bluff line is a use that is allowed by a conditional use permit approval and therefore does not violate the spirit and intent of the ordinance. The permit would would not be contrary to public health or safety so long as the required stormwater and erosion control measures and standards are included with the plans and the plans are compliant with the ordinance. The results of the proposed project, in addition to the principal structure and deck, would not constitute a nuisance. Runoff will not be directed to the bluff or adjacent properties. Work will be done within reasonable working hours. All standards in the Riverway Ordinance Overlay District shall be met. Staff do recommend approval of the conditional use permit with recommended conditions. The conditional use permit will allow filling and grading within the 40 feet of the slope preservation zone in conjunction with a single-family expansion and a deck expansion. The county land use permit for construction of the residence will be required prior to any land disturbance. Our construction activities compliance will include a stormwater and erosion control plans as required. Sanitary permits will be required if the applicant is replacing or relocating any components of the private on-site wastewater treatment system. There will be no filling or grading or vegetation removal within the slope preservation zone. Vegetation and trees that will be removed shall be replaced. The property owner shall execute and record an affidavit describing the approved stormwater management, erosion and sediment control, and vegetation management plans and maintenance requirements for each with the County Register of Deeds within 30 days after construction is completed. They will have up to 2 years to complete construction. Prior to expiration or revocation, the applicant may request an extension of up to 6 months from the zoning administrator. These conditions may be amended or conditional conditions may be added if unanticipated circumstances arise that would affect the health or safety of citizens or degrade the natural resources. Conditions will not be amended or added without notice to the applicant and an opportunity for a public hearing. Any new owners must adhere to the standards and conditions of the approved permit. This decision applies to the property rather than to the individual, is valid for the specified property, and is not transferable. Accepting this decision means that the applicant and their agent have read, understand, and agree to all conditions of this decision and have no objections to county staff conducting unannounced site inspections to check for compliance with the permit. Any questions?
I suspect not. Okay, does anyone want to speak? The applicant have anything to say about this? Okay.
I have contacted Ogden Engineering already about.
If you have anything to say, you have to come up here.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Ogden Engineering was who did my original stormwater and erosion. Well, I didn't even need an erosion because I didn't do any land disruption for that first thing. But I have contacted them and asked them if they would do the erosion control. And Louis at Ogden, who I've spoken to a couple of times, said that my property will be, he said, we'd be happy to do that. He said the stormwater calculations are easily done once our architectural drawings are done, so they know how much surface there is.
Right.
And then he said as far as erosion control, he said that's very, very straightforward given how your land is. So that'll be done.
Okay, very good. Board members, any questions for the applicant? No? Okay. Does anybody want to speak in opposition to this application? Seeing no movement, I'll assume not. Any general comments on the application? Okay, it's 11:27. We'll close the hearing on this application. Board members, discussion? Doesn't appear to be any discussion. I'll entertain a motion to make a decision on this.
I'll move to approve the conditional use as permitted, as presented.
I'll second it.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. It's unanimously approved. Okay, now that completes our variance issues. The next agenda item, since the ward situation has been resolved, is our discussion on the revocation of or revisions of the Board of Adjustment bylaws. And my inclination is to not do anything with this until Buck is available to weigh in on them. Is there any discussion otherwise?
Heather, did you have input on that?
I think it's fine to postpone them. Ms. Denzer and I work together to make the modifications in tracking, but it may make sense to wait until Mr. Malik is here. So if there's a motion to postpone, we can also address this at the July meeting.
That would be my preference.
I would ask if there are any questions from any of the board members at this time. We could get answers prepared for the next meeting. If they had any questions on anything.
Doesn't seem to be.
Okay.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to postpone the decision.
So move.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second to postpone the bylaws revisions. All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed, nay? And unanimously approved. Okay, I've got announcements and correspondence. Do we have a rough idea what we've got coming up next month by any chance, other than the ward application?
I can tell you that there is one setback waiver, and I don't remember where it is. And then there is one conditional use in conjunction with a land use permit as well. That's
This
it.
board wouldn't do the setback waiver.
Oh, you're right. Sorry. So, yeah, just one conditional use that has come in.
And the 2 items postponed from today.
Correct.
Okay, is there any possibility we'd need 2 days?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Heather, do you have any?
I don't think so. I think one day should be enough.
Yeah.
Okay, just checking. All righty. Date of our next meeting,
Thursday, July 27th, it says.
Thursday, July 27th. Any further discussion on that one? All righty. That being the case, it's 11:30. We'll declare this proceeding adjourned. Thank you all for coming.